Maggie Lawson never intended to become a powerful figure in the restaurant industry. Success hadn't been her goal. It was simply the natural outcome of each pancake flicked with heart. On a crisp autumn morning, Maggie stood quietly behind the worn wooden counter of the first diner she opened more than 2 decades ago. Her fingers slowly traced over the rough carvings left by generations of customers who once sat there, each marking a memory, a piece of the diner's soul. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows, still foggy from the breakfast rush, casting golden streaks across the black and white checkered floor. Maggie wasn't just looking at a restaurant, she was seeing a piece of herself. This was where she started, where she poured her love, and where she still felt alive. Truly alive, in a world that never slowed down. "Maggie, you're doing it again," came a familiar voice from behind her. Elaine, the silver-haired waitress who'd been by Maggie's side since day one, placed a coffee mug in front of her with practiced ease and a gentle touch. Maggie smiled faintly, but her eyes didn't move from the counter. "Doing what?" And Elaine squinted at her. "That thing where you look around like you're about to say goodbye. You do it every time something's wrong." Maggie gave a small nod, her smile fading. She was trying to memorize every detail, like she might never see it again. She couldn't admit the truth. That tucked inside her pocket was a letter from her doctor. A diagnosis that changed everything. For the past 3 days, that letter had remained folded, untouched but heavy. The headaches she'd brushed off as stress were something much more serious. 6 months of treatment ahead. Not optional. A path she had no choice but to walk, if she wanted to live. And then there was her mother, her lifelong companion. It had been 6 weeks since she passed. 6 weeks of silence and grief. They'd shared everything. Their dreams, their Saturday morning breakfasts at the corner booth. Now the dream was hers alone, and the weight of it pressed deep into her soul. She set her coffee cup down, her hand trembling slightly, but her gaze was steady. "I need to talk to you and Marcus," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, like the autumn wind outside. "Tonight, after close, in the office." Elaine's eyebrows lifted, surprised, but she just nodded. She didn't need to ask. She knew, like all long-time servers do, how to read silence, the space between words. Maggie was carrying something heavy, something that could change everything. Her new glasses, with thick tortoiseshell frames, completed Maggie's transformation. Her silver hair was neatly trimmed, her body thinner from months of treatment, and her eyes, now behind unfamiliar lenses, seemed to belong to someone else. Even long-time regulars might not recognize her at first glance, and that was exactly what she wanted. Without telling anyone, Maggie had returned to town 3 days earlier than planned. Her treatment had been successful, but a lingering unease remained. Elaine's recent phone calls had sounded forced, tense. "Everything's fine," she'd insisted, but Maggie knew better. Sometimes it's what isn't said that says the most. Now, parked a block from the diner, Maggie took a deep breath, steadying herself. Today, she wasn't returning as the owner. She was walking in as a customer, a stranger to the place she once called home. She stepped out of the car in a simple sweater and faded jeans. Not the polished look of someone running 5 restaurants, but of a woman trying to reconnect with her roots. But as she neared the building, Maggie froze mid-step. A strange, disorienting sense of loss flooded over her. The hand-painted sign with its warm, whimsical lettering was gone. In its place, a sleek, backlit logo in cold, bold letters. Magus Place. The familiar red door, once a symbol of welcome, was now a flat, lifeless charcoal gray. The vibrant flower boxes she had once tended with care had been replaced by cold geometric metal sculptures, as if someone had scrubbed the love from the place completely. "What on earth happened?" she whispered, pushing open the door, and inside was worse. Gone were the mismatched wooden tables and the floral chairs found at estate sales and artisan fairs. In their place were matching black leather chairs and glass-topped tables. Cold, sterile. The wall, once filled with children's drawings, community boards, and customer memorials, had been replaced with a giant mirror, reflecting nothing but the soulless transformation back at itself. The lighting was clinical, all bright white LEDs replacing the soft amber glow that had made everyone look a little warmer, a little more at home. Everything screamed, "This is not your place anymore." A young hostess in a black uniform approached, her smile polished but empty. "Table for one?" "Yes, please," Maggie said quietly, scanning the room. No familiar faces. No Elaine, no Marcus. No one who once called this place a second home. The hostess led her to the worst seat in the house, next to the restrooms, a spot Maggie had long forbidden for guests. She sank into the chair, a lump forming in her throat. She had braced herself for change, but not for this erasure. She opened the menu and was hit with another shock. Prices had nearly doubled. The comfort food that once defined her diner had been replaced with over-styled dishes, full of empty buzzwords. "Your server will be right with you," the hostess said, disappearing without another glance. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Servers hurried by, attending to better-dressed guests who had arrived after her. Maggie watched, invisible, unwelcome. For the first time in decades, she felt like an outsider in her own home. Then, a tall man in a designer suit emerged from the back office. His name tag gleamed. Kyle Hastings, general manager. Her heart clenched. Kyle, the man she had warned Marcus never to promote, was now clearly in charge. He moved with smug authority, correcting staff with icy precision and flashing performative smiles at certain customers. When his gaze landed on Maggie, sitting alone and unattended, his smile vanished. He strode over, his steps calculated. "Is there something I can help you with?" he asked, his tone anything but helpful. "I've been waiting nearly 20 minutes for service," Maggie said, struggling to keep her voice even. Kyle's eyes scanned her outfit. Old sneakers, simple jeans, nothing flashy. "I see. Well, we're quite busy today. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the diner down on Elm. Their prices and environment might better suit your needs." He'd surged to Maggie's cheeks. "Are you asking me to leave because of how I'm dressed?" "Oh, not at all," he said with a fake smile. "I just wouldn't want you to be surprised by our menu prices. We've rebranded as an upscale dining experience." An elderly couple nearby glanced over, then quickly looked away, their discomfort clear. Maggie clenched the edge of the table. Then she saw them. The Hendersons, sitting just 2 tables away. They had come in every Sunday for 15 years. They didn't recognize her now, but their expressions showed how deeply they were affected by what they'd just witnessed. It stung more than words. "I can afford this meal," Maggie said firmly, "and I want to eat here." Kyle's smile hardened. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. We have a strict reservation policy during peak hours. Your hostess seated me without saying a word about reservations. A mistake on her part. It will be handled." There was menace in his tone, a deliberate coldness. Maggie felt her body tense. "You're asking me to leave?" she said, louder now. More people were watching. Kyle leaned closer and hissed, "This place has standards. We can't have just anyone loitering around. It affects the ambience for our preferred clientele." "Loitering?" Maggie nearly gasped. "I'm a customer." "Ma'am, please don't make a scene," Kyle said, snapping his fingers. A security guard, young, hesitant, appeared beside her. Maggie blinked, stunned. Her diner had security now? "Please escort this woman out," Kyle instructed. "She's disturbing our guests." The guard touched her arm gently. "Ma'am, if you'll come with me." Silenced by disbelief, Maggie let herself be led to the door. As she passed the counter, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. Her mother's antique brass cash register, once the beating heart of the diner, was gone. In its place was a sterile touch. Outside, the guard mumbled an awkward apology and stepped back inside. Maggie stood on the sidewalk, trembling. Cold wind brushed past her, but the chill came from inside, from the realization that her home, her dream, had been stolen in plain sight. She had been thrown out of the very place she built with her own hands, and the people who did it had no idea. They had just woken a storm. What had really happened in the past 6 months? Who had betrayed her? Back at the hotel, Maggie stormed into her room like a caged tiger. The humiliation still clung to her skin, but it was already transforming into something else. An unshakable resolve, the fury of a mother protecting her child, of a leader watching her kingdom get stolen. She opened her laptop, picked up her phone. First, call Elaine, straight to voicemail. A second time, still no answer. Elaine never ignored her calls. Maggie left a terse voice message. "We need to talk." Urgently, without waiting, she logged into the diner's financial system using her owner credentials. Part of her feared she might have been locked out, but the system still recognized her. The data loaded fast, and what she saw made her stomach twist. The revenue was up 22%, but food costs had dropped by 35%. The numbers didn't lie. That meant cheaper ingredients, smaller portions, and higher prices. Profits were climbing, but at the cost of the restaurant's soul. Labor expenses had plunged too. She pulled up the employee roster and, once again, her heart sank. Darnell, the fry cook who had been with her for 12 years. Lucia, the waitress who could remember every regular's order. Joseph, the dishwasher who worked his way through college here. All gone. Each termination came with strange justifications. Darnell, food safety violations. Lucia, customer complaints. Joseph, chronic tardiness. Accusations that made no sense for people Maggie trusted with her business. She whispered in shock, "This isn't downsizing. This is destruction." A text message came in. Not from Elaine. An unknown number. "Don't call again. Not safe. Meet me at River Park Duck Pond Bench, 8 p.m. Maggie froze. Not safe? What was happening to Elaine? Back on her laptop, she pulled up everything on Kyle. Hired as assistant manager just 4 months ago, promoted to general manager within 2 weeks. His resume showed a business degree and experience with upscale restaurant chains. It looked solid, but didn't explain the lightning-fast rise. Who had signed off on it? Marcus Chen. "Oh, Marcus," Maggie murmured, voice heavy with disappointment. "What did you do?" Digging deeper, she spotted a familiar name listed as a reference for Kyle. Harrison Reynolds, regional director at Pinnacle Restaurant Group. One quick search pulled up a family wedding photo. Reynolds beaming next to Kyle. The caption read, "Uncle Harry and Nephew Kyle." Nepotism. But that wasn't the worst part. Maggie opened Marcus's email account and filtered for exchanges with Kyle. One thread stood out. Subject, Pinnacle Opportunity. It revealed the entire scheme. Pinnacle wanted to acquire Maggie's place as a stepping stone into regional expansion. Marcus was the broker. Kyle, the inside man. The plan was to modernize, boost short-term profits, then convince Maggie to sell once she returned. In return, Marcus would receive a generous commission. "You betrayed me," Maggie whispered. But that wasn't the end of it. The accounting records showed missing cash, over $7,000, 0 cents. In 4 months, not enough to trigger automatic alerts, but enough to indicate systematic embezzlement. Kyle wasn't just dismantling her legacy. He was stealing from it. Another text buzzed in from the same unknown number. Ring your laptop. Be careful. They're monitoring the hotel. A chill ran down Maggie's spine. She shut her laptop, threw on her coat, and slipped the laptop into her bag. 7:45 p.m. She exited the hotel through the back. The night wind brushed her face as she walked the quiet streets, each shadow seeming a little more ominous. For the first time in her life, Maggie felt like a character in a crime thriller, on the run from a darkness born of betrayal. River Park lay quiet under the fading twilight. By the duck pond, a lone figure sat hunched on a bench. Maggie slowed her steps. The figure looked up, and Maggie gasped. Her face was swollen, one eye bruised and nearly shut, her cheekbone discolored. No longer the strong, steady woman Maggie had always known, only pain, visible and raw, and Maggie knew instantly they'd gone too far. My God, Elaine. What happened to you? Maggie choked, unable to look away from her battered friend. Kyle's security team happened, Elaine replied bitterly. I questioned the new supplier policy during a meeting. The next day, I accidentally slipped in the cold storage room. Maggie's blood ran cold. You're saying he had you attacked? Not directly. Elaine glanced around nervously. He just mentioned to his security consultant that I was becoming a problem. I tried to warn you, subtly. I was afraid they were monitoring our calls. They mean? Maggie asked. You mean Kyle and Marcus? Elaine shook her head, the weight of truth settling heavily in her voice. Bigger than that, Pinnacle isn't some harmless corporation. They've buried labor violations and health code scandals. Just enough hush money in the right hands. Maggie stood still, trying to process the depth of it. When I started asking questions, when I began collecting evidence, Elaine gestured to her bruised face. This was their response. What evidence? Maggie whispered. Everything. Elaine said, pulling out a small USB drive. I've documented it all since the day they fired me. Financial fraud, spoiled ingredients, fake inspection reports, off-book supply deals. Kyle's skimming from every angle. They'll fire you? Maggie gasped. After 20 years? Elaine gave a bitter laugh. For unauthorized access to financial records. A policy Kyle conveniently implemented the day before. Maggie clutched the USB like it was life itself. This is enough to have him arrested. Maybe. But only if you can prove I'm not just a disgruntled ex-employee with an agenda. Elaine leaned in, her voice dropped to a whisper. You have to be smart, Maggie. These people don't play fair. You'll need irrefutable proof. Maggie nodded slowly, her eyes sharpened with conviction. This was no longer just about reclaiming a diner. This was about exposing the rot, threatening the heart of everything she'd built. Will you help me, Elaine? For the first time that night, Elaine smiled despite her injuries. I've been waiting all week for you to ask. 3 days later, in a small roadside diner outside town, Maggie sat across from Carlos Mendez, her former IT manager, who helped build her systems from scratch. You want me to do what? Carlos blinked in disbelief. I need you to restore access to the security cameras without triggering alerts, Maggie said calmly. And I need a few hidden cameras in the manager's office. Carlos opened the folder Maggie slid across the table. As he turned the pages, his brows furrowed deeper. This is beyond regular monitoring. You're talking about covert surveillance, digital trace masking. Can it be done? Maggie asked directly. Carlos ran a hand through his graying hair. Technically, yes. Legally? That's a bit tricky. We've covered that, said Diana Winters, Maggie's attorney, sitting beside her. As the owner, she has every right to monitor workplace areas. No recording in restrooms or private spaces. All actions fall within her legal authority. Carlos still hesitated. Kyle fired me 3 months ago when I questioned his new surveillance policy. He told staff the cameras weren't recording, but they always were. He's paranoid, obsessed with control. And now, Maggie said, voice like steel, he's going to feel what it's like to be watched. You'll operate remotely. We've set up secure access, and of course... She leaned in and whispered a figure. Carlos's eyes widened. Okay, that's generous. That's how serious this is, Maggie replied. Kyle and Marcus aren't just wrecking my business. They're hurting people. Carlos's face darkened. I heard about Darnell's kitchen accident. No one believed he burned himself that badly on equipment he'd used for 12 years. Exactly. This ends now, Maggie said, tapping the folder. Can you do it? Carlos looked down, then slowly nodded. I'll need 48 hours to set everything up, without tipping them off. When's the takedown? Friday night. Dinner rush, Maggie replied. Then she turned to Diana. Your team ready? Diana nodded. Court orders are prepped. The moment we catch financial fraud on tape, we move. Our contact at the police is on standby. The plan was intricate, each step choreographed like a final act. While Carlos worked his digital magic, Maggie underwent one final transformation. With the help of a professional makeup artist, the younger sister of a former waitress, Maggie would become someone entirely new. Gone were the silver hair and simple clothes. In their place, rich brunette curls, tailored designer attire, tasteful jewelry, and the poised confidence of a seasoned investor. At exactly 7:15 p.m. Friday night, Maggie stepped out of a rented luxury car, leather portfolio in hand, and walked toward what was once hers. The hostess, who had once dismissed her, nearly stumbled over herself. Miss Victoria Harrington? Mr. Hastings is expecting you. She was led to the best table in the house. Maggie scanned the room. Elaine and two trusted former staff members sat strategically disguised as guests, each wearing hidden audio and video devices. A faint voice crackled in her earpiece. All systems live, cameras rolling, we're on. Kyle appeared shortly after, wearing his usual fake smile. Miss Harrington, what an honor to have you. I've prepared a special appetizer selection. Please, enjoy. Maggie, now fully embodying Victoria, returned the gesture with a charming smile and a soft Boston-accented voice. How thoughtful. I'm eager to hear more about this investment opportunity. It had begun. The final act was in play. I always like to experience the full menu before considering any investment in a new concept, Maggie said politely as Kyle confidently sat down across from her, his eyes gleaming like a man who smelled money. Your assistant mentioned you're looking to invest in promising local dining concepts with expansion potential, Kyle said, as if the deal was already in the bag. You represent a group of partners, Maggie replied calmly, opening her leather portfolio and gracefully flipping through a few pages. Your establishment caught our attention. The recent upgrades seem to be delivering impressive results. Kyle straightened up, as if performing for an invisible camera. Revenues up nearly 25% in just 5 months. Cost controls, menu engineering, staff affiliate engineering, entire business model has been redefined. Staff optimization? Maggie tilted her head with feigned curiosity. Cutting the dead weight, Kyle said flatly. Before I arrived, this place operated like a charity. The previous owner, a local woman who inherited the place from her mother, had zero business acumen. Free meals for veterans, a community bulletin board, treating staff like family instead of tools. It was all very sentimental and very unprofitable. Through her earpiece, Maggie heard Carlos gasp, but her face remained calm, wearing nothing but a polite smile. And the owner approved all these changes? She asked, looking Kyle directly in the eye. His grin turned more conspiratorial, like he was letting her in on a juicy secret. She, fortunately, had a little mental breakdown after her mother died, took a 6-month leave and handed operations over to a regional manager with vision. By the time she returns, the profit margins will be so irresistible. She'd be crazy not to sell. Fascinating, Maggie nodded. her tone light while her gaze sharpened. "I'm especially interested in your cost control policies. Can you elaborate on your supplier relationships?" Kyle needed no encouragement. He launched into a detailed explanation of mutually beneficial vendor partnerships, which was just a fancy cover for kickbacks and under-the-table deals. Maggie glanced discreetly toward Elaine, seated quietly in the corner, a barely perceptible nod. From her earpiece, Diana's voice came through clearly. "We've got enough. Keep him talking a little longer." Maggie leaned in, voice laced with professional curiosity. "Do you believe these numbers are sustainable long-term?" "Absolutely," Kyle replied, lowering his voice as if sharing trade secrets. "Customers can't tell the difference between real butter and our blend. Same with the coffee. We cut it with a filler that's a third of the cost. It's all about perception." "And the daily cash flow? I noticed some fluctuations." Kyle smirked. "That's just a small internal incentive system I created. Skim a bit off the cash every day, small enough not to raise any flags. The owner's still using outdated accounting methods, so creating a little financial cushion is easy." "Very creative management," Maggie said, her voice even, but inside she was on fire. "And the owner?" she asked finally. "You said she's on leave?" Kyle made air quotes mockingly. "Mental health leave. Rumor has it she couldn't handle the pressure after her mother passed. Really pathetic." In her earpiece, Diana's voice was crisp. "We have more than enough. You can drop the curtain whenever you're ready." Maggie slowly closed her portfolio, every motion deliberate. "Calmed. Last question, Mr. Hastings," she said, her voice dropping an octave, cold, sharp. "What would you say if the owner walked in right now and heard everything you just said?" Kyle burst into laughter. "Not possible. And even if she did, it wouldn't matter. She signed over operational control to Marcus. Next week, I'll have Pinnacle's offer in hand. Numbers too good to refuse. She won't have a choice." Maggie stared at him for a moment. Then, slowly, she reached up and removed her brunette wig. Her silver hair shimmered under the light. She took off her glasses. Her eyes, clear, fierce, locked onto his. "Are you sure about that?" The color drained from Kyle's face in an instant. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. You can't be." "Maggie Lawson," she said calmly. "Owner of Maggie's Place. The woman you just admitted to lying to, stealing from, and disrespecting." Kyle tried to laugh it off. "Ms. Lawson, this was all a test. A loyalty test. Marcus and—" "Save it." Maggie cut him off, her voice sharp as steel. "Marcus was terminated this morning after we found your entire email thread with Pinnacle, and everything you just said has been recorded. From 3 different angles." The diner froze. Elaine and the former employees stepped forward, removing bracelets and lapel pins, concealed recording devices. Longtime customers stood up in disbelief, eyes wide as the truth unraveled before them. The kitchen staff emerged from the back, forming a silent wall. Diana entered from the front, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a man in a suit flashing a badge. "Kyle Hastings, I'm Detective Wilson, Financial Crimes Division. We need to speak with you regarding discrepancies in your business accounts." Kyle flushed crimson, then turned ghostly pale. "This is a setup. You can't—" "Can't what?" Maggie said, rising to her full height, radiating strength. "Can't monitor my own business? Can't investigate theft? Can't protect my employees from intimidation and assault?" She turned to Elaine. Their eyes met, filled with pain, but also victory. "Everything you've done, Kyle. It's all been recorded." In a final desperate move, Kyle lunged for the exit. He got only a few feet before the officers were on him. One stepped smoothly into his path while the other cuffed him, saying with calm authority, "Resisting arrest won't help your case, Mr. Hastings." As the cuffs clicked shut, Kyle shouted in vain, but no one listened. Every eye in the room turned toward Maggie. She took a deep breath and faced the silent room. A few murmurs rose. Some patrons had already pulled out their phones, recording. Staff members stood frozen, a mix of awe and anticipation on their faces. "I owe all of you an explanation," Maggie began, her voice steady and warm. "6 months ago, I stepped away from this place to get treatment for a serious illness and to grieve the loss of my mother. In my absence, the people I trusted betrayed that trust. They didn't just change this restaurant. They hurt the people inside it." She walked slowly to the center of the room, every step rekindling warmth into the cold space. "To our loyal customers, I'm sorry for what you've had to endure. The inflated prices, the diminished quality, the sterile atmosphere. That ends today." Applause broke out in one corner. Then more joined. Some longtime patrons had already recognized her. The woman who'd once made this place feel like home. "To our former employees who were wrongfully terminated, your positions are waiting if you want to return, and you'll receive back pay from the date of your dismissal." From the shadows, Darnell stood up, his bandaged hands still healing from his kitchen injury. He gave a silent, loyal nod. "I'm in, boss." Maggie turned to the current staff, many of them young, confused, unsure what they were witnessing. She didn't blame them. Her voice softened. "And to you, those hired under Kyle's leadership, I invite you to stay. Learn what Maggie's place is really about. We're not just a restaurant. We're a community, a family." Kyle was let out in cuffs, still protesting. No one listened. Outside, news vans had begun to arrive, tipped off by Diana's team. The story of an undercover owner unmasking corruption in her own business would spread across the region by morning. Marcus Chen had already been arrested at his home earlier that day. Pinnacle Restaurant Group, the corporate giant behind the hostile takeover attempt, was now facing a wave of regulatory scrutiny. Deanna stepped up beside Maggie, folding her phone closed. "The paperwork's done. You officially have full operational control over every location again." Maggie squeezed her lawyer's hand, eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Diana said with a half smile. "The hard part is just beginning." Right on cue, Elaine appeared beside them, holding her old weathered notebook. "So, boss," she said, her eyes sparkling, "where do we start?" Maggie looked around the diner, no longer a sterile husk left by Kyle's regime, but the foundation of something beautiful yet to come. "We start with what matters most," she said, her voice full of quiet certainty. "We bring the heart back." 3 weeks later, the soft light of dawn spilled across the sidewalk in front of Maggie's place. Maggie stood quietly, a hot cup of coffee warming her hands, gazing at the newly restored storefront. The cold modern sign that once hung above the door had been taken down. In its place was a hand-painted wooden sign, almost identical to the one from 2 decades earlier. In the bottom right corner, a small detail made her eyes sting with emotion. A tiny blue butterfly, her mother's favorite symbol. Nervous, Elaine appeared beside her, arms crossed. "A little," Maggie admitted with a smile. "Feels like the first day. All over again." After everything, Maggie had made a hard decision to close all 5 locations for 2 full weeks of restructuring. The financial loss would be significant, but she understood some things mattered more than money. Honor, people, the soul of a place. "Griddle's hot, boss," Darnell called cheerfully from the front door. Inside the diner, everything had changed, or more accurately, been restored to its true form. The mismatched furniture, carefully curated over the years from flea markets and antique stores, was back. Paintings from local students, the community bulletin board, and the wall of remembrance for beloved regulars had all been lovingly reinstalled. A special corner was now dedicated to Maggie's mother, featuring a framed photo and the newspaper article detailing the recent scandal, hung with quiet pride. Maggie had insisted it stay. "We don't hide the past, we face it and move forward." From the back, Carlos called out, "Deliveries here." now serving as operations manager across all locations. Carlos was also in charge of cybersecurity and safety protocols. When Maggie jokingly asked, "Is that today's paper?" he simply grinned. "Nope, something else." Following him out the back door, Maggie was surprised to find a small crowd gathered. Former staff, some who had left years ago, were holding small personal items, a photo, a potted plant, an old ceramic mug. "What is this?" Maggie asked, voice catching in her throat. Teresa, who had once waited tables while studying to become a teacher, stepped forward and placed a small framed note in Maggie's hands. "We heard what happened, and we wanted to help bring the heart of this place back," she said. "Each of us brought something that represents what Maggie's meant to us." The note read, "Thank you for letting me work flexible hours so I could finish college. My students and I will never forget you. Teresa." For the next hour, Maggie received gift after gift like this. Each item carried a story. Each story softened old scars. Emergency loans that saved someone's home. Schedules adjusted for personal crises. A helping hand at just the right time. The gratitude in every face spoke louder than words. At exactly 7:00 a.m., Maggie walked to the glass door and flicked the sign to open. Outside, a line had already formed, familiar faces and newcomers alike. Locals who had read about the story in the news. People who believed in second chances. People who weren't just here for breakfast, but to support something money could never buy. The first to enter was none other than Harold Jenkins, a spry 85-year-old veteran who'd eaten breakfast here nearly every day for 15 years, until Kyle made him feel unwelcome. "Welcome back, Harold," Maggie said warmly, as if no time had passed. "Good to be back, Maggie," he replied with a smile, making his way to his old booth in the corner, the very one Kyle had once reserved for preferred customers. The morning passed in a flurry of motion, but there was none of the mechanical corporate air typical of restaurant chains. The staff, most of them rehired, moved like a jazz ensemble, their rhythm instinctive. Laughter echoed from old jokes. Knowing glances were exchanged as customers returned to their usual orders, as if no time had passed. Amid the busy hum, Diana arrived and slid into a seat at the counter, visibly pleased. "Kyle and Marcus took plea deals," she said in a low voice, not to disrupt the warm din. "Full restitution plus penalties." "And Pinnacle?" "They're under full investigation. Their stock's in freefall." Maggie simply nodded, her expression calm. "I never wanted to ruin them," she said softly. "I just wanted to take back what was mine." Deanna nodded and continued. "By the way, that article you approved? It's gone viral. You've had franchise inquiries from 3 different states." "Franchise?" Maggie blinked, truly surprised. "I never considered that." "Maybe it's time you do," Diana replied. "But do it your way. No shortcuts. No gimmicks. Just heart." Maggie glanced around the bustling diner. It wasn't just about food or service. It was about faces, stories, connections. "Maybe later," she said with a smile. "Today isn't about dreaming of the future. It's about remembering who we are." That afternoon, old suppliers, those Kyle had cut for not being cheap enough, started arriving. The organic farmer brought a small basket of produce. The family dairy Maggie had worked with from the beginning sent their college-aged son with a tub of premium ice cream for the day's pies. As Maggie accepted their gifts, she realized something deeper. Her relationships with vendors had never just been business. They were partnerships, built on trust, fairness, and mutual respect. That evening, after the diner had closed, Maggie gathered her staff in the quiet dining room. Their faces were tired, but glowing with the unmistakable energy of people who had just witnessed something reborn. "I have something to say," Maggie began, meeting each of their eyes. "When I left 6 months ago, I thought I was stepping away just to heal. But in truth, I was leaving right before the biggest battle of my life." She leaned lightly against the counter, still holding her untouched coffee. I used to believe what made Maggie's place special was the good food, the warm service, the inviting space. But these past few weeks have taught me something far more important. What truly matters is people, trust, and genuine care. She lifted her mug. El thought he could make this place better by cutting corners and raising prices. He built a restaurant, but destroyed a home. Today, all of you proved what really matters. Elaine raised her own mug. To Maggie's place. Not just a diner, said Darnell, eyes shining. A landmark, a family, a second chance, added a young waitress, once hired by Kyle, now finally understanding what a supportive workplace truly meant. That night, when everyone had gone, Maggie remained alone in the office, the same office Kyle had once claimed for himself. On the desk lay her mother's old recipe book, the leather cover worn, the pages yellowed with time. She opened it to the final page. There, in her mother's soft handwriting, was a message she had read 100 times, but only now fully understood. The secret ingredient is always love. Without it, you're just selling food. Maggie closed the book, her heart full. 6 months ago, she had walked away broken, unsure of the future. Today, she had reclaimed not just her business, but her purpose. Because Maggie's place was never about the walls, or the menu, or the systems. It had always been right here, in her heart, in the love she poured into it every single day.